I stood in front of my mother's grave, staring down at the cold granite headstone. The engraved letters had faded with time. The grass had long ago covered the black soil of the gravesite. The clouds quickly passed overhead under a darkening sunset. "I know you never got to see it, Mom," I whispered as tears streamed down my cheeks. "But I finally did it. I got clean." The only response was the hissing of the cool autumn wind across the cemetery. Blinking quickly, I wiped at my eyes. Through the haze of tears, I glimpsed something in the forest. The graveyard had a spiked, metal fence running along its perimeter. Immediately on the other side of the fence loomed dark pine trees and thick patches of pricker bushes. Beneath one shadowy tree stood a silhouette. It looked like a tall man in a black suit and dark sunglasses. His skin appeared chalk white, his body hairless and long, though he was far away. I could just barely see a lipless mouth chattering, opening and closing in a superhuman blur. The rest of his body stayed as still as death. "Hello," I yelled, taking a step toward the fence. "Are you okay?" I had never seen such a pale luster on a living person before. It was eerie. I briefly wondered if the man suffered from some extreme form of albinism or vitiligo. It looked like all the blood had been drained from his body. A feeling of dread gripped me as the lipless mouth abruptly slammed closed. The man stayed as still as a statue, keeping his back straight and his body rigid. I squinted, seeing that his skin appeared strange. It looked as hard as marble, inhumanly clear and flawless. The feeling of dread only increased. Stumbling away, I spun and began running in a blind panic towards my car. I was the only one in the graveyard, the sole living person in this orchard of bones. I flung the door open, slamming it shut and locking it immediately. Night quickly descended like a falling knife. I flipped the lights and engine on. The cemetery had only a single shared exit and entrance. It stood at the end of the circular paved road that encircled the bone orchard. As I put the car in drive, I glanced quickly in the rearview mirror. I instantly had to repress an urge to scream. The man in the black suit was standing directly behind my car now, as if he had been teleported there. He had his sunglasses in one hand now. Two protruding cataract eyes stuck out the front of his head, each the size of a small orange. Slitted, reptilian pupils ran down the length of the alien eyes. There was a look of primal fury frozen across the deathly white face. I accelerated as fast as the car would go. It took off like a bucking horse, the engine whining with a high-pitched mechanical sound. I continuously glanced in the rearview mirror as increasing waves of terror ran down my spine, but I saw no sign of the man in the black suit. I peeled down the graveyard's lonely road and out onto the dark, empty streets of Frost Hollow. As I disappeared around the turn, I saw the brake lights turn on, painting the surroundings in its crimson light. With trembling hands, I pulled out my cell phone, dialing my brother Philip's number. I had heard of others in the town getting visits from the men in black. Many had mysteriously disappeared soon afterwards. Others became hermits, deleting all their social media and turning off their phones. One rumor stated that a local conspiracy theorist writing about lights in the sky had allegedly received a visit from the strange men. Within 24 hours, he sold his house, scrubbed as much personal info as he could from the internet, and bought a one-way plane ticket out of the USA. I hadn't actually believed any of the rumors circulating, but my brother Philip had. He had been stockpiling ammo and guns for the last few weeks. I pressed the dial button as I sped around a corner, looking up in time to see a naked woman stumbling down the road only a few feet away. She was walking towards my speeding car with glazed, sightless eyes. Strange, circular bruises covered the length of her body. I slammed on the brakes. The car fishtailed as I spun the wheel all the way to the left. A silent scream welled up in my throat as the world spun around me in a circle. The front bumper missed the woman by inches, but still, she never reacted. In a cloud of smoke and burnt rubber, I nearly smashed into a thick oak tree. The back of the car missed the trunk by less than a foot as the car finally came to a stop. My heart was pounding my ears, so fast that it came across like a rushing waterfall. I heard a small voice somewhere nearby, as muffled and quiet as a whisper. It said, "Hello, hello," in a confused voice over and over. I looked down at my lap, seeing my brother's name emblazoned across the screen. With trembling fingers, I picked it up and put it to my ear. "Philip, I saw them," I whispered. "The men in black. I need help." "Where are you?" he whispered frantically. I looked around, seeing the naked woman still stumbling blithely down the middle of the road in a zombie-like trance. "I'm down the road from Mom's grave," I said. "There's some weird shit going on. I almost just hit a naked woman. She looks drugged." Philip swore on the other end of the line. "You need to get out of there immediately," he said. "Come here. We can barricade ourselves inside and take them out one by one if we need to." "I need to check on this lady," I said. "I can't just leave her here." "It's probably a trap," he said. "Oldest trick in the book, man. You just put a woman on the side of the road, make her look like she's hurt, and then, when someone stops to help, you rob and kill them. Remember Bonnie and Clyde?" "I'll call you back," I said, nervously looking around the car. I was stopped in the middle of the dark, empty street. The woman continued ambling forwards in eerie, zombie-like movements towards the cemetery. I slowly opened the door, expecting some sort of ambush, but nothing stirred. I crept out as quietly as I could, observing the woman. She was only a stone's throw away by this point. My headlights illuminated her naked back and legs. I called out above the screaming of the wind. "Hey, do you need an ambulance? You nearly got run over," I yelled. That was when I first noticed something was deeply wrong with her body. I saw dozens of thin strands poking out of her skin. Black. Spidery filaments half a foot long surrounded by angry red patches of inflammation. Circular black and purple bruises extended out. A roadmap of fresh injuries. I squinted, confused at what lay in front of me. With every step she took, the strands skittered and jumped. Sharp insectile legs that snatched blindly at the empty air. As my words echoed eerily into the darkness pressing in on me, the woman's head jerked with a loud crack of bone. She froze in her tracks, her bloody feet leaving thin scarlet footprints. The skittering filaments seemed to move faster, whipping back and forth in widening arcs, where they ate into the woman's pale flesh. Clotted blood appeared in rivulets and drops, looking as black as onyx and as thick as maple syrup. Her head ratcheted to face me, her body spinning in quick, jerky movements. Her wide, unseeing eyes had started crying tears of black, clotted blood. They ran down her cheeks like polluted rivers. I instinctively backpedaled towards the car, groping blindly behind me but afraid to look away. I didn't know what this woman was capable of. Her mouth opened in a silent scream. Black sludge dripped down her lips and chin. She vomited a constant stream of it, slowly letting the fetid, rank fluid stain her chest and legs. "Fuck this," I cried, turning to sprint back into the open car door. I heard the sickening sound of wet flesh tearing, felt a spray of warm blood on my back and neck. I leapt into the driver's seat, slamming the door shut and locking it. I glanced up, my headlights still shining brightly down the street, but the naked woman no longer stood there. Her body lay on the street, discarded like a broken toy. Her chest stood open, the sharp points of bone stabbing upwards through a mass of clotted gore. Something black and spidery crawled upwards out of the pale, ripped flesh, pushing itself up on douncins of long, thin legs. Like an infant from hell, it forced its way out of its mother. Its body reminded me of a jellyfish, round and curving with two enormous, white eyes bulging from the center. Its skin gleamed like obsidian, glossy and black, still wet and shining from the fresh blood of its victim. Each of its legs looked about the height of a man. Its central body, whose only feature was its lidless eyes and two squirming tentacles, made it twice as tall. It stretched its stick-thin legs out with a cracking sound, like grinding shards of bone. With the vents running in the car, a rank smell flooded in, like ozone and antifreeze. The strange, spidery jellyfish twisted its many legs, skittering forward straight at my car. Its skin rippled like the fabric of a kite, and a high-pitched keening emanated from its alien body, a sound like a siren rising and falling. I put the car in drive, accelerating at the creature. I saw it only feet away. I thought I would smash right into it and kill it, but at the last moment, it leapt off the ground. The sharp points at the end of its many legs danced across the hood of the car with a scraping of metal. It ran over the windshield and hood, leaping behind me. I heard a sick, wet thud as I hit the woman's mutilated, ripped open corpse. I slammed on the brakes, spinning the wheel. I wanted to kill this thing before it reached town. I had no idea what it was, but I was determined to bring its eldritch life to a quick end. It had turned around as well. My heart leapt into my throat when I saw it blocking the road. its two writhing tentacles intertwined into a knotted wet fist of gleaming muscle. It brought it down on my windshield as I accelerated toward it. I heard the glass shatter, felt something wet and hard as stone smash into my forehead. I saw bright stars and nearly blacked out, spinning the wheel and slamming on the brakes. I heard the rising keening of the siren-like wailing emanating from the shining black flesh of the creature. It rose and fell in eerie waves, sounding dreamlike and distorted. Breathing hard, I felt warm blood trickle down my forehead. I raised my fingers to my temples. When I pulled them away, they gleamed brightly with scarlet droplets. The skittering steps of the strange, jellyfish-like creature became unfocused and random, like those of a baby deer. It fell across the middle of the road, its many sharp legs still twitching with manic energy. I took the chance, pressing the gas all the way down. The tires spun with the smell of burning rubber before sending me forward in a flash. The driver's side tire crunched over the lidless, dead eyes of the creature. I looked in the rearview mirror, seeing a spray of blue blood and gleaming knots of gore spreading from the top of the creature's exploded head all the way to the edge of the pavement. Its many sharp, black legs still skittered, jumping and twitching like those of a poisoned wasp. I put the car in reverse, running over it a second time. Breathing heavily, I got out. Looking down at the alien monstrosity, it was still. The smell of antifreeze hung in the air, thick and cloying. The woman's body was not much better, between the jagged mutilation of her open chest and the crush injuries from the tires. Looking both ways down the road nervously, I opened my trunk, seeing an old tarp I always kept tucked in there. Careful not to touch the creature's strange blue blood, I wrapped it up as best as I could. Carrying it to the trunk, its long, jointed legs hung over the edge. I pushed down hard, and with a sick cracking of alien bones, the still, black corpse folded up within the tarp. I slammed the trunk shut, wiping my hands off on my jeans over and over. I got back in the driver's seat and pulled off, a victor with a world-shattering souvenir in his trunk. I felt like I was floating on cloud 9 as I turned the next corner, glad to get away from the dead body and the blue blood staining the pavement. I knew I didn't want to be anywhere close to here when the government caught wind of it. As my thoughts had manifested them, headlights descended down the street, with a rising sense of panic jumping into my throat. I took off down the street, hugging the tight corners with terrified precision. A massive black pickup truck appeared, slowly ambling past me. I sped across Frost Hollow towards Philip's house, excited to show him the evidence. Both of us had heard strange rumors around town for months, but no one had ever been able to prove anything demonic or extraterrestrial had caused it. I wasn't sure where this kind of creature came from, this demented parasite that ate its way out of the host's body. But I hoped the evidence of its corpse would be able to give us some answers. I constantly checked the rearview mirror, nervously looking for sirens or unmarked black cars. Never in my wildest dreams could I imagine what the men in the black suits would actually show up in. By the time I pulled in the driveway, it was already pitch black across the whole of the town. I flung open the trunk, lifting the tarp holding the dripping, glossy corpse. The body was surprisingly light, no more than the weight of a small child. I had no trouble running with it in my arms, though the long, twisting legs made it somewhat awkward. I saw Philip's pale face peering out the front window, his eyes wide and surprised. A moment later, I heard the lock click and the front door swung open. "Goddamn, you made it," he whispered. His face was a mask of sweat. I pushed past him, leaving drops of blue blood behind me. Like breadcrumbs, they led back to the car, showing my trail. "Lock the door," I commanded, running to the bathroom. I dropped the still, black corpse into the tub. The tarp unfurled, showing the smashed head and twisted legs hiding underneath. I heard Philip creep in behind me. "Holy shit. Little brother," he exclaimed, his blue eyes round orbs of shock. "What radioactive pond did you pull that thing out of?" "This came out of a person," I said, staring grimly down at the spidery limbs and thick, sludge-like gore. I saw this woman walking down the road, and these legs were sticking out of her back and chest. This thing attacked my car. It nearly killed me. It ended up smashing my windshield and slicing me up pretty bad. In the end, I got it. But I shook my head, feeling overwhelmed and sick. I wondered if the police would track me down when they found the woman's body. "What about the men in black?" Philip asked. "You said they were watching you?" Just one. I think, I said. It was watching me at the graveyard. Philip frowned, pulling the shower curtain closed. We need to arm ourselves, he told me. If the rumors I've been hearing around town are true, then we might have some visitors eventually. Remember how Mom used to say that if we didn't wash between our toes, tiny spuds would start growing there? Philip asked, a wry half-smile playing on his thin lips. The memory came back to me, simultaneously full of love, yet emanating a bittersweet sense of loss and sadness. He handed me a shotgun and a box of buckshot. After reaching into the gun safe, he took out a large, black rifle and slammed a magazine into the bottom. I wonder if we should pour bleach on that weird corpse. It might have parasites or embryos that will start growing if not. We need to keep it in good condition, I said. That's our only evidence for all the weird shit going on. For all we know, pouring chemicals on it could destroy it. He opened his mouth, looking like he was about to respond, when we heard a loud knocking on the front door. Philip froze like a deer in the headlights. I saw my terror reflected there like a grim death mask. Don't panic. It might just be, he began when the knocking sounded again, louder and more insistent this time. Side by side, we ran down the hallway, sprinting down the steps and glancing out the front window. Oh, it's just my neighbor, Philip said, relief washing over his face. I saw a tall, bearded man with a massive beer gut standing there. What does he want? Coming here at midnight, I asked, glancing down at my watch. He just shrugged. Let's see, he said, flinging open the door. There was a rippling in the air, like a mirage in a desert. The image of the greasy, bearded man dissolved in soft waves. Behind it, I saw 3 men in black suits wearing dark sunglasses. Their heads were hairless and pointed, their skin corpse white and inhumanly smooth. They had no lips, but they had painted on crude lips using lipstick. I saw no sign of any vehicle. We stared at each other across the no man's land of the threshold. The one in front raised his long, twisted arms to his face, removing his sunglasses. 2 enormous eyes bulged from the pale, smooth sockets. His slitted, reptilian pupils rapidly constricted and dilated. May we come in? I believe we have some issues to discuss. The man in front gurgled in a low, diseased voice. His strange, lidless eyes continuously bored into me, as focused and intense as lasers. Don't let them in, I whispered to Philip. I don't know why, but I instinctively knew that if we invited these creatures inside, we would lose what little power we still retained in this situation. If you're going to make this difficult, we can make it difficult for you as well, the leader said, pulling a badge from his pressed suit. We're investigating a hit and run that occurred earlier tonight. The 2 men in black in the back stood as still as statues, their impenetrable black sunglasses staying firmly affixed over their smooth, plasticky faces. Then come back with a warrant, Philip snarled, still holding the rifle with an iron grip, his knuckles turning white with tension. What agency do you even claim to come from? The leader snapped his badge shut with a soft click. It disappeared back into his suit like a magic trick. Mr. Lamington, I believe you have a quarter in your right pants pocket. Please remove it for me, the leader said to Philip, the thin membranes of his eyes twitching and rippling, almost looking ready to burst. What does that have to do with anything? Philip asked. A faint, inscrutable smile played on the corners of the leader's painted lips. Confused, Philip reached into his pants. He frowned as he felt around, pulling out a quarter in his open palm. How did you? He asked, but the leader of the men in black cut him off. An increasing feeling of apprehension gripped me, though I didn't know why. Observe the coin, he said, his pupils constricting and dilating faster. There was suddenly an overpowering smell of ozone, a barely perceptible whining. The quarter started changing colors, flashing a cold cyanotic blue, then a burning hot red. I watched in amazement as it disappeared into thin streamers of gray smoke. Now imagine that was your heart or brain. Do I make myself clear? We will never let you inside. I spat at the group. The leader turned his swollen snake eyes to me. I instinctively took a step back, my face involuntarily revealing more than I intended. Philip nodded coldly, reaching out and slamming the door shut in their faces. Philip and I stayed close together, going around and checking every window and door. I wondered why they had asked permission to come in. Were they like vampires? Creatures who couldn't cross the threshold until told to do so? I brought this up to Philip, who frowned with concentration. "The vampire thing is just an old myth," he said, his eyes nervously flicking out the front window every few seconds. We still held our firearms tightly to our chests. I checked the clock. Seeing it was already past 3 a.m., evil spirits can't enter your mind without being invited. At least according to medieval rumors. People unintentionally invite them in through various practices. Sometimes evil spirits enter people who played with the occult, or someone who committed murders. They tend to target those whose minds are overflowing with hate, confusion, and... I heard a shattering of glass from the back of the house. Both Philip and I jumped, looking from the living room to the kitchen door. Our nerves were already frayed after hours of intense fear and concentration. "They're breaking in," Philip yelled, running to the back. I followed closely behind him, cradling the 12-gauge shotgun to my chest like a baby. I tried to take refuge in its cold metal presence. Philip flung open the kitchen door, revealing rising currents of flame and choking black smoke. The window above the sink stood smashed. As I stared in horror, I saw another Molotov cocktail arc gracefully through the air. It came through the window, the top of its filthy, oil-streaked rag sputtering with blue flames. The bomb hit the sink with a tinkling crash. There was a whoosh as the fire exploded across the far end of the room. "Run!" I screamed at Philip, grabbing his arm and jerking him backwards. He continued to stare at the flames with a hypnotized, unbelieving expression, watching as his house and everything he owned disappeared before his eyes. "Come out!" I heard the leader shriek in an electronically amplified voice. It sounded like it came from the back of the house, where the Molotov cocktails came from. Philip and I ran side by side to the front door. "Shit! What's that?" Philip said, pointing outside. I saw an enormous black pickup truck parked outside, its engine still running, its lights turned on. Two massive men with long, black beards and dark, glittering eyes stared daggers at my sedan, which was parked in my brother's driveway. A sense of horror overtook me as I realized they were staring at the hood and shattered windshield, where the blood of the woman and the creature still glimmered darkly. The men looked like they could have been professional football players. They were stocky and tall, with thick layers of muscles covering their bodies. They were both dressed in full camo. The one in front had a black caterpillar hat covering his massive head, while the one in back let his long, greasy brown hair spill over his shoulders. Both carried large black pistols in their right hand. "Come out! I know you murdered my daughter." The man in the caterpillar hat screamed in a voice that shivered with insanity. "You ran her over not even half a mile from where I live. This is payback time. Fucker." He glanced at the other man and gave a barely perceptible half nod. As one, they raised their pistols and started emptying the magazines, shooting at the windows and doors of the burning house. An insane, fanatical luster shone on their faces. The smoke had grown thick across the entire first floor by this point. I didn't know where the men in black were, but I was just as afraid of running into them as I was of the two insane hunters outside. The pistol bullets pinged crazily through the house, hitting lights and erupting through drywall. "We need to get out of here," I cried, grabbing Philip's shoulders and shaking him. He looked dissociated and shell-shocked. "We're going to burn alive or get shot." "The basement," he cried. "We'll go out the basement door to the side of the house." I nodded, not giving us a moment to consider alternate possibilities. We both knew we had run out of time. We flew down the basement stairs. The power went out at that moment, plunging us into darkness except for the strobing, or flickering light from the fire upstairs. Philip flicked a lighter with his left hand, holding it out in front of him to ward off the creeping shadows. The air was much cooler and easier to breathe in the basement, at least for the time being. Thin streams of black smoke had already started filling it, floating across the room like ghosts. Philip ran up the few concrete steps leading out. In front of us stood two metal doors angled at 45 degrees. Beyond that lay freedom or death. "Let's go," I hissed, being as quiet as possible. The crashing of burning cabinets and the hissing of the flames gave us some cover, but not much. Philip took a deep breath and then pushed the doors open. We looked out on the left side of the house, across the grassy lawn and towards the dark evergreens surrounding Philip's house. Nothing moved. "It's our only chance. We need to get to the forest and then we can find help," I hissed. He almost laughed at that. "Who would help us? The police? The government?" he asked contemplatively. I just shook my head, pushing myself up and out of the basement, It was not an issue worth thinking about yet. I stumbled forward across the lawn as a harsh shout rang out behind me. I turned, seeing the two hunters in their camo jackets running around the side of the house. Philip was only a few feet behind me. "Kill them," the man in the caterpillar hat roared, firing his pistol at us over and over. The bullets whizzed past my head with terrifying cracks and whines. I spun, aiming the shotgun and firing. I heard an agonized scream through the ringing in my ears, but I dared not stop long enough to look back. The cover of the trees stood only a stone's throw away. I ran for it, hearing a few more bullets explode all around me, sending splinters of wood flying in every direction. Once I had made it to the cover of the trees, I glanced back, seeing Philip bleeding on the lawn, a bubbling bullet hole in his neck. I cried out, nearly running back to my injured brother. Sickening waves of regret and pain ran through my blood. The man with the long hair also lay on the ground, half of his face ripped off and spurting. I could see the ragged, blood-stained skull grinning behind that patch of mutilation. The man in the caterpillar hat noticed, kneeling down and whispering something to his friend. The men in black appeared by the road, each holding a long, silver gun attached to a square metal backpack. I quickly realized that these were flamethrowers. I had seen pictures of them before when they were used in Vietnam and World War II. These looked much more modern, but they were still the same in basic design. Philip's rifle laid by his side, his twitching fingers trying to reach for it. I raised the barrel of the shotgun, aiming for the man in the caterpillar hat, but the men in black beat me to it. The three of them stood side by side, their faces blank masks of nothingness. In unison, their metal flamethrowers ignited, throwing jets of concentrated flame 100 feet away, like the attack of a fire-breathing dragon. The man in the caterpillar hat never knew what hit him. He had been focused on Philip when the flames ate him from behind. Philip saw it coming, though. With the last of his dying strength, he raised the rifle, pointing at the leader and firing. At the same moment, I opened fire, trying to stop these monstrous creatures. The leader fell as a bullet pierced his heart. White, shimmering blood leaked out, like the lubricating fluid of some strange, futuristic robot. It glimmered with rainbows like waste oil, twisting, morphing currents of color that danced and curved as more blood gushed out. He grabbed for his chest, falling forward silently in surprise. A rush of flame consumed Philip at that moment, covering his body like a blanket. By the time it receded, he had become little more than melted fat and ashes. In grief and loss, I kept firing until all the bullets in the shotgun were used up. I didn't realize, at first, that all three men in black lay dead on the lawn. The house fire had turned into an inferno by this point. Rising up into the black sky, I stood alone at the edge of the forest, my brother dead. The evidence I had gathered would be nothing more than ashes as well by this point. As usual, we would not be able to prove the horrors occurring here to the outside world. I felt certain this was not the first time evidence had been destroyed in this town. In the silhouette of the blazing fire, I saw hundreds of glossy, black creatures, each no bigger than a baseball. They looked like the hellish parasite that had erupted from the woman's body, but in miniature. They crept out of the broken windows and flaming doors on jointed, spidery legs. The quiet streets of Maple Grove seemed to breathe a sigh of relief as another academic year came to an end. Our little rental house, nestled between ancient oaks and well-manicured lawns, buzzed with the kind of energy only freedom brings. Megan, Sophia, and I had just finished our last final exam, officially concluding our college careers. "Oh my God, I cannot believe we are actually done," Sophia exclaimed, her French accent becoming more pronounced, as it often did when she was excited. She flopped onto our worn leather couch, her dark curls bouncing with the movement. I grinned, still riding the high of turning in my last paper. I know, right, 4 years of blood, sweat, and tears. And now we're free women. Megan emerged from the kitchen, arms laden with bottles. And you know what that means? Ladies, we celebrate. We cheered, clinking our bottles together in a toast to our success. As the night wore on, our laughter grew louder, our stories more animated. It felt like we were standing on the precipice of something grand. The whole world stretched out before us. Okay, I said, wiping tears of laughter from my eyes after Sophia's impression of our ancient history professor. I don't know about you guys, but I'm starving. Should we order something? Ooh, yes, Megan perked up. I've been craving that new Thai place. What's it called? Spice Palace. Sophia nodded enthusiastically. Absolutely. Zier Pad Thai is to die for. I pulled out my phone, navigating to our favorite delivery app. As I scrolled through the menu, my stomach growled in anticipation. We huddled around the screen, debating appetizers and main courses with the seriousness of scholars discussing ancient texts. Finally, our order was placed. The app cheerfully informed us that our food would arrive in about 45 minutes. We settled back, content in the knowledge that delicious food was on its way. So, Megan said, a mischievous glint in her eye. Now that we're officially done with college, who's excited for the real world? Sophia groaned dramatically. Do not remind me. I still have no idea what I am doing with my life. I was about to chime in when my phone buzzed. Glancing down, I saw a notification from the delivery app. Oh, looks like our food is on its way, I announced. But as I opened the message, a chill ran down my spine. Instead of the usual automated update, there was a personal message from our driver. Can't wait to meet you, lovely ladies. See you soon. I frowned, showing the screen to Megan and Sophia. Is it just me, or is this kind of creepy? Sophia peered at the message. That is strange. Maybe he is just being friendly. Megan shrugged, but I noticed a flicker of unease in her eyes. Yeah, probably nothing to worry about. Some people are just overly familiar, you know. I nodded, trying to shake off the uneasy feeling. We returned to our conversation, but I couldn't help glancing at my phone every few minutes. The cheerful atmosphere from earlier had dimmed slightly, replaced by a subtle tension we all felt, but didn't acknowledge. About 20 minutes later, the doorbell rang. We all jumped, then laughed nervously at our reaction. I'll get it, I said, standing up. As I approached the door, I heard Megan call out, "Be careful." I rolled my eyes, but my heart was beating a little faster than normal. Taking a deep breath, I opened the door. The man standing on our porch was unremarkable, average height, average build, with short brown hair and a forgettable face. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Evening. Ladies," he said, his voice oddly smooth. "I've got your order right here." I forced a smile. "Thanks," I said, reaching for the bags. As I took them, his fingers brushed against mine. They were ice cold. "Enjoy your meal," he said, his eyes roving past me into the house. "I hope we'll see each other again soon." Before I could respond, he turned and walked back to his car. I quickly shut the door, letting out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. "Everything okay?" Sophia called from the living room. "Yeah," I replied, my voice a little shaky. "Just a weird vibe, I guess." I brought the food into the living room, and we tried to recapture our celebratory mood. The food was delicious, but I couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had settled over me. As we were finishing up, my phone buzzed again. Another message from the delivery app. "Hope you enjoyed the food. You girls sure look like you're having fun in there." I almost dropped my phone. "Guys," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, "look at this." Megan read the message, her face paling. "What the fuck? How does he know we're having fun? Can he see us?" Sophia jumped up, rushing to the windows to check the curtains. "They are all closed," she reported, her accent thickening with stress. "He cannot see us." I refreshed the app, hoping it was just a glitch, but there was another message waiting. "Don't bother checking the windows. I don't need to see you to know what you're doing. I'll always know." We huddled together on the couch, all pretense of celebration forgotten. Our phones lay silent on the coffee table, but they seemed to loom over us, harbingers of messages we were too afraid to read. "What do we do?" Megan whispered, her voice trembling. I shook my head, at a loss. What had started as a night of triumph had twisted into something dark and terrifying. And I had a sinking feeling that this was only the beginning. As if in response to my thoughts, all three of our phones buzzed simultaneously. We looked at each other, fear mirrored in each of our eyes. Slowly, I reached out and turned my phone over. The message glowed on the screen, 5 words that made my blood run cold. "Let's play a game, shall we?" The words on the screen seemed to pulse with malevolent energy. What kind of sick game did this guy have in mind? "We should call the police," Sophia said, her voice quivering. She reached for her phone, but before her fingers could touch it, all our devices buzzed again. "I wouldn't do that if I were you. The police can't help you now. Besides, that would ruin our fun." Megan let out a choked sob. "How is he doing this? It's impossible." I tried to think rationally, despite the fear clouding my mind. He must have hacked our phones somehow. Or maybe he's got access to the delivery app's data. Suddenly, the lights flickered, plunging us into momentary darkness. When they came back on, Sophia was pale as a sheet. "How did he do that? It's like he's everywhere." As if in response, another message appeared. "I have my ways. Now, shall we begin our game?" My hands shook as I typed a reply. "What do you want from us?" The response was almost immediate. "To play. Of course. Here are the rules. I'll give you a series of tasks. Complete them. And you live, fail, and, well, let's just say you won't like the consequences. Your first task, bring me a gift. You have 1 hour. The clock starts now." "This is insane," Megan hissed. "We can't actually do what he says. Can we?" Before I could respond, we heard a loud thump from upstairs. We all frowned, staring at each other in horror. Did you hear that?" Sophia whispered. I nodded, my heart pounding. Maybe it's just the house settling. Another thump, followed by the distinct sound of footsteps. "Oh God," Megan whimpered. "He's in the house." We huddled closer together on the couch, paralyzed with fear. The footsteps seemed to move from room to room upstairs, occasionally pausing as if searching for something.
"We need to get out of here,"
Sophia said, her accent thicker than ever. I nodded, trying to think through the panic. "Okay, let's make a run for it. On 3, we dash for the front door. 1, 2. Before I could say 3, all our phones buzzed again. The message made my blood run cold. "Leaving so soon, but I haven't found my gift yet." The footsteps upstairs suddenly stopped. Then, slowly, we heard them approaching the stairs. "Quick, the kitchen," I hissed. We scrambled off the couch and into the kitchen, frantically looking for anything we could use as a weapon. As I pulled open a drawer, grabbing a large knife, Megan gasped. "My phone. It's gone." A chill ran down my spine. How had he managed to take it without us noticing? Just then, Sophia's phone chimed with a text, her hands trembling. She opened the message. It was from Megan's number. "I'm upstairs. Help me. He's coming." We all stared at the phone in disbelief. Megan was right next to us, her face as white as a sheet. "It's a trick," I whispered. "He's trying to lure us upstairs." The lights flickered again, and in that brief moment of darkness, we heard the stairs creak. He was coming down. "The back door," Sophia mouthed, pointing. Clutching our makeshift weapons, we crept towards the back of the house. Every shadow seemed to move. Every creak of the old house sounded like footsteps. Just as we reached the door, all our phones buzzed simultaneously. "You can run, but you can't hide. I'll always find you, always." With shaking hands, I unlocked the back door. We burst out into the cool night air, not daring to look back as we ran into the darkness of our backyard. As we reached the fence, I realized with growing horror that this was only the beginning of our nightmare. We were out of the house, but we were far from safe, and our tormentor was still out there, always one step ahead. Our feet pounded against the damp grass as we ran, the cool night air burning in our lungs. The shadows of the trees seemed to reach out for us, every rustle of leaves sounding like footsteps in pursuit. Megan and I vaulted over the back fence, landing hard on the other side. "Come on," I gasped, grabbing Megan's arm. We sprinted down the alley behind our house, not daring to look back. It wasn't until we reached the end of the block that I realized something was terribly wrong. The pounding of feet behind us had faded to just 2 sets, mine and Megan's. "Wait," I panted, skidding to a stop. "Where's Sophia?" Megan's eyes widened in horror. We both turned back towards our house, straining to see through the darkness. That's when we heard it, a blood-curdling scream that could only belong to Sophia. "No," Megan cried, already moving back the way we came. As we approached our house, my heart nearly stopped. There, illuminated by the porch light, stood our tormentor. And in front of him, a knife pressed against her throat, was Sophia. "Help me!" Sophia's terrified voice carried to us, her French accent thicker than ever in her panic. The man's eyes gleamed in the dim light, a twisted smile playing on his lips. "Welcome back. Ladies, I knew you wouldn't abandon your friend." Suddenly, every light in the house and on the porch went out, plunging us into total darkness. Sophia let out another piercing scream, abruptly cut short. "Sophia," I yelled, my voice cracking with fear. For a moment, there was only silence. Then, Megan's phone buzzed in her pocket. With trembling hands, she pulled it out and read the message aloud. "If you want to see your friend alive again, come inside. Let's finish our game." I felt sick to my stomach. "We can't just leave her," I whispered. Megan nodded, her face pale but determined. "We have to go back in." Slowly, we crept towards the house. The front door stood slightly ajar, a silent invitation into our own personal hell. As we crossed the threshold, the floorboards creaked beneath our feet, announcing our presence to whatever horror awaited us inside. The house was pitch black and eerily quiet. We fumbled our way through the familiar space, now made strange and threatening by the darkness and our fear. "Sophia," I called out softly, my voice barely above a whisper. No response. We made our way to the living room, our eyes slowly adjusting to the darkness. The faint moonlight filtering through the curtains cast long, distorted shadows across the floor. Suddenly, Megan grabbed my arm. "Look," she hissed, pointing to the coffee table. There, illuminated by the glow of its screen, Saturday Sophia's phone. A video was playing on loop, footage from earlier that evening, showing the three of us laughing and celebrating. Our own faces stared back at us, frozen in a moment of joy that now felt like it belonged to another lifetime. A new message popped up on the screen. "Such happy memories. Shame they have to end." The lights flickered back to life, momentarily blinding us. As my vision cleared, I saw something that made my blood run cold. On the wall, written in what looked horribly like blood, were the words "Third floor, me Ala Northeast." Megan and I exchanged a terrified glance. We both knew our house didn't have a third floor. Another message appeared on Sophia's phone. "Tick-tock. Ladies, your friend doesn't have much time." "What do we do?" Megan whispered, her voice trembling. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. "We have to find her. Whatever sick game this guy is playing, we can't let Sophia pay the price." Megan nodded, her face set with grim determination. "Together." I grabbed her hand, squeezing it tightly. "Together." As we started towards the stairs, the house seemed to groan around us. Each step felt like it might be our last, the darkness ahead promising nothing but more terror. Our hearts pounded in our ears as we climbed the stairs, each creak of the old wood sending a jolt of fear through us. As we reached the second floor landing, we hesitated. There was no third floor, but there was an attic. Could that be what he meant? Suddenly, a loud thump came from above. We both looked up, frouncing in terror. Then, before either of us could react, something fell from the attic opening. Something heavy, something human. Sophia's lifeless body hit the floor with a sickening thud. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. I could only stare at the broken form of my friend, her eyes open and glassy, staring at nothing. "No," Megan whimpered beside me. "No, no, no." Our phones buzzed simultaneously. With shaking hands, I pulled mine out. The message played automatically. In Sophia's voice, "You broke the rules, so there were consequences. Who will be next? I wonder." I felt like I was going to be sick. How was this possible? Sophia was dead, right in front of us. How could we be hearing her voice? Suddenly, another sound cut through the silence. A voice, tinny and distant, coming from Megan's pocket. 911, what's your emergency? I turned to Megan, realization dawning. She looked back at me, her eyes wide with fear and guilt. "I'm sorry," she whispered. I didn't know what to do. I was so scared. Before I could respond, our phones buzzed again. This time, the message was in the stalker's voice. "Naughty girls. I told you not to call for help. Now you'll both pay." The house fell into an eerie silence. We stood there, paralyzed by fear and grief, for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes. The stalker was nowhere to be seen or heard, which somehow made it even more terrifying. "We need to get out of here," I finally whispered, my voice hoarse. "We can't stay here with Sophia." I couldn't bring myself to say Sophia's body. Megan nodded, tears streaming down her face. We carefully made our way downstairs, every shadow making us jump, every creak of the floorboards sending our hearts racing. We huddled in the living room, away from windows, constantly checking our phones for any messages from our tormentor, but there was nothing. The silence was oppressive, suffocating. "Do you think he's gone?" Megan asked after what must have been an hour. I shook my head. "I don't know, but we can't stay here forever. We need to make a run for it." Just as we were gathering our courage to leave, we heard it. The distant wail of a siren. Relief flooded through me. The police were coming. We were saved. "Come on," I said, grabbing Megan's arm. "Let's go meet them." We ran to the front door, hope giving us a second wind, but as we burst onto the porch, that hope turned to ash in my mouth. There was indeed a car with sirens approaching, but it wasn't a police cruiser. It was an ordinary car with a siren light stuck to the roof, and as it pulled up, I saw a face that made my blood run cold. It was him, our tormentor. He had been waiting, biding his time, setting up this final, cruel trick. "Run," I screamed, turning back towards the house. But Megan hesitated for a split second too long. The crack of a gunshot split the air. Megan cried out, stumbling forward before collapsing on the porch steps. Pain exploded in my leg as another shot rang out. I fell, my leg giving way beneath me, but adrenaline and terror propelled me forward, limping badly. I managed to drag myself back into the house, slamming the door behind me. I could hear him outside, his footsteps slow and deliberate. He was in no hurry. He knew he had me trapped. Choking back sobs of pain and fear, I limped through the house, desperately searching for a place to hide. The pain in my leg was excruciating, and I could feel warm blood soaking through my jeans. As I huddled in a dark corner of the kitchen, clutching a knife in my shaking hands, I heard the front door open. Slow, measured footsteps moved through the house. Come out, wherever you are," his voice sang softly. "The game isn't over yet." I closed my eyes, trying to control my ragged breathing. This couldn't be how it ended. It couldn't. In the distance, I heard more sirens, real ones this time. Was it possible? Could help really be on the way? The footsteps paused, and for a moment, there was only silence. The sound of breaking glass shattered the silence. Heavy footsteps thundered through the house. "Police, drop your weapon." I huddled deeper into my hiding spot in the kitchen, my heart pounding so hard I was sure they could hear it. The voices seemed to be coming from the living room. "Clear," I heard someone shout. Then, Jesus Christ, we've got a body here. My breath caught in my throat. Megan. Baker. Check upstairs. I'm going in further. A gruff voice commanded. I heard more footsteps. Slower this time, more cautious. They were getting closer to the kitchen. Suddenly, a gunshot rang out, followed by a cry of pain. It wasn't the police, it was him, the stalker. Officer down. Suspect is armed. Someone yelled. Chaos erupted, more gunshots. The sound of furniture being overturned. Grunts of struggle. I pressed my hands over my ears, trying to block out the terrifying sounds. Then, 3 rapid shots in succession, followed by an eerie silence. Suspect is down. I repeat. Suspect is down. I held my breath, not daring to move. This is Roberts. We need 2 buses. 1 officer hit. Suspect down. And we've got 2 civilian casualties. 2 casualties. Megan and Sophia. A sob escaped my throat before I could stop it. Wait, I heard something. Kitchen area. Proceed with caution. Footsteps approached slowly. The kitchen light flicked on. I squinted against the sudden brightness. raising my knife with a trembling hand. "It's okay," a gentle voice said. "You're safe now. I'm Officer Ramirez. Can you tell me your name?" Tears of relief streamed down my face as I lowered the knife. "Emily," I choked out. "My name is Emily. It's been 6 months since that horrific night. 6 months since I lost my 2 best friends. 6 months since my life changed forever." The police told me later what happened. The real 911 operator had dispatched units to our location after Megan's call was cut short. They arrived just in time to save me, but too late for Megan and Sophia. Our stalker, as it turned out, was more disturbed than we could have imagined. His name was Robert Caldwell, a 34-year-old former IT specialist with a history of mental health issues and a string of stalking charges. The detectives shared his background with me, hoping it might help me understand. Not that understanding could ever ease the pain. Caldwell had been diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia in his early 20s, but had stopped taking his medication years ago. He had a peculiar delusion that he could predict and control people's fates through elaborate games. His previous stalking charges involved young women who he believed were players in his twisted scenarios. What made him particularly dangerous was his technical expertise. He had worked for several high-profile tech companies before his mental health deteriorated, and he used these skills to hack into our phones and the delivery app. The voice messages were created using advanced voice-mimicking AI software. It was also calculated, so terrifyingly methodical. The most chilling part was learning about his lair, a small apartment filled with surveillance equipment, computers, and walls covered in photos of potential players. We were just his latest victims in a long line of tormented women. The thought of how long he had been watching us, planning his game, still makes me sick to my stomach. Caldwell didn't survive that night. When the police cornered him in our house, he opened fire, injuring one officer before he was fatally shot. In a twisted way, his game ended with him as the final casualty. I visit the cemetery every week, laying flowers on Megan and Sophia's graves. Sometimes I talk to them, telling them about my day, my therapy progress, the way the world keeps turning, even though it feels like it should have stopped. I've grown close to their parents. We share a bond of grief that no one else can truly understand. We have dinner together once a month, sharing memories of the girls and supporting each other through the hard days. Sometimes, we talk about Caldwell, trying to make sense of the senseless, but mostly, we focus on remembering Megan and Sophia as they were. Vibrant, loving, full of life. My leg has healed, though I still walk with a slight limp. The physical therapist says it will improve with time. I'm not sure the same can be said for the scars on my soul. I've moved out of the house where it all happened. I couldn't bear to stay there, surrounded by memories and ghosts. My new apartment is small, but it's mine, a fresh start. With our degrees completed just before that fateful night, I found myself thrust into the real world we had all been joking about. But instead of the exciting career I had imagined, I've started working at a local cafe. It's not glamorous, but it's helping me heal in ways I never expected. There's a sense of normalcy in the daily routine, the smell of fresh coffee, the chatter of customers, the simple tasks that keep my hands and mind occupied. And then there's Daniel, my coworker. He's really sweet and kind, always ready with a gentle smile or a corny joke when he sees me struggling. He makes me feel safe in a way I haven't since that night. Daniel knows about my past. It was all over the local news, after all. But he's never pushed me to talk about it. Instead, he's just there, a steady, calming presence. Sometimes, when our eyes meet over the espresso machine, I feel a flutter in my chest that I thought I'd never feel again. I'm not ready for anything serious yet, but I hope that maybe, someday, something more might happen between us. The fear never really goes away. I still check my phone obsessively for strange messages. I still flinch at unexpected noises. I still can't order delivery without having a panic attack. But working at the cafe, being around people, especially Daniel, it's helping. Slowly but surely, I'm learning to live again. I'm here, I'm alive, and I'm determined to make my life count. For Megan and Sophia, for myself. If you're reading this, please remember to be careful. The world can be a dangerous place, full of monsters wearing human faces, but it's also full of beauty and love and friendship. Hold on to that. Cherish it. And maybe, if you're ordering in tonight, consider cooking instead. Or better yet, visit your local cafe. You never know who you might meet there. This happened about 5 years ago, back when I was going through hard times and was homeless. I used to live in Denver, CO, which is where this took place. There are several cemeteries in the Denver area, but there's one on the outskirts of Denver that's very large and very old. I think it may be the oldest one that's still being actively used. Before I became homeless, I didn't know much about this area. I had always gotten a creepy feeling around there, but didn't know why until I was on the streets. After that, I heard from many different people that it's got lots of underground tunnels, and some homeless people live in these tunnels. But in the deeper tunnels, there is cult activity. These tunnels have secret entrances all over the area, and the homeless that live around this area avoid some of these spider holes because people have been known to disappear near them. Mostly women. This area has a river going through it, alongside the graveyard. One side of the river has a darker feel than the other. It's eerie over there, and smells like death. Anyways, one time, I was wandering the area with a few other acquaintances. We had nowhere to go, and decided to hang out in the abandoned part of the graveyard. The older side. It had just gotten dark and it was windy. It was also fall, so it was cold. We were huddled up against gravestones to block the wind. One of the people I was with knew the area better than me, and he had warned me to be very vigilant. I figured this was, so we didn't attract the attention of security or police or fellow homeless, but I later found out why he was so anxious about the area. It was probably around 1:00 p.m. We had sort of all been just sitting in silence, trying to stay warm, hoping the night passed quickly when I heard my acquaintance whisper, "Hey, heads up, keep quiet." I had already been quiet, but I immediately tensed up, assuming he spotted security or something. But as I looked around, I saw in the distance some small, flickering lights, appearing here and there all around the graveyard. It's like people had been spread all around the large graveyard, and they were all holding lighters that they flicked on, which only then showed they were all over. After my eyes adjusted a bit, I recognized they seemed to be candles. I looked harder, and could sort of see the outlines of people holding these candles. Jay whispered, "We gotta go." We clumsily started grabbing the few items we had around us. Jay came right up next to me and said, "Follow me, and don't look at them." I was thinking, WTF. Me and our other friend quickly started following Jay, moving at a quick walk straight to the break in the fence where we had come in. I was stupid enough to look behind me and saw the lights divided by figures continuing to appear all around us, and they were walking to the middle of the graveyard to stand in a circle. I passed by a few, and saw out of the corner of my eye they were wearing black cloaks. I could feel the menacing presence and stares, like they were daring me to look at them, but I had an overwhelming feeling that if we left them alone, that they would leave us alone. One thing that haunted me afterwards was the way they seemed to move towards the middle. They moved quickly and smoothly, like they were gliding and just seemed to morph out of the darkness. My instincts were on high alert. I knew whoever they were pure evil. We got the hell out of there, and once we got to the fence, we full-on sprinted for a few blocks. Jay didn't explain much. He just said to avoid those people, and don't look them in the eye, or they could have power over you. I definitely had gotten that feeling from the encounter. I asked why they weren't scared of cops or security, and he said basically that they got away with stuff. They did, because the authorities didn't want to risk looking into it, because they didn't want to be targeted. I don't know how true this is, but I do know what I saw and felt. I have had several scary experiences during my time in Denver, and some other stories about this area. So you guys let me know if you want more background or want to hear the other things I've experienced divided by heard about this area. Me and my fiance were planning a trip to Utah for about a month. It was kind of an impulsive decision, but she wanted to visit her dad's grave in Delta, Utah. We just returned back home to Colorado today. Looking back on the trip, nothing went right, and so many weird things happened. On the way to the Airbnb we booked in Manti, we saw many angel numbers. She's very spiritual, I'm a little skeptical. But everything felt normal for the most part. One thing I noticed was how many deer signs I saw, but I hadn't seen a single deer at all. Once we got to the Airbnb, I personally started to feel weird. I know that town is very Mormon, and I've never had any problem with them. I think everyone has a right to their own beliefs, and I respect it. But the way the town felt around the temple was eerie to say the least. While we're in the Airbnb, something felt off. She used her pendulum to try and talk to her dad, but a spirit wouldn't let her get through to anyone. This spirit was Mormon, and she told us to leave and we weren't welcome. I felt a gut-sinking feeling at this point, and I asked her to ask if me reading a portion of the Mormon Bible would make the spirit more comfortable with us staying there. She said yes, and I read a small bit before we left to get dinner. We decided to get Denny's right outside Manti. When we walked in, the servers kinda just stared at us for a good few minutes. Until I stared back for a while, that's when they decided to come and give us a table. I had a weird vibe from the people there, but I didn't make a fuss, because I'm sure we looked different, especially in a small town coming from Denver. Once we got our food, I almost immediately felt sick after eating. I took only 3 bites before feeling sick. I thought maybe it was because we had been on the road literally all day. But as soon as we got back to driving to the Airbnb, I threw up. We instantly chalked it up to car sickness, until I had my fiancée try a piece of my food, and she began to feel sick almost immediately as well. Yet her food was perfectly fine, and we got almost the exact same meal. We decided at that point not to eat out anymore and to use the money for food on groceries, so we left once more. We went to the nearest Walmart, and that experience was mostly normal besides the stares and weird glances we got. As we drove up to the Airbnb, my stomach began to sink again. I swear I saw what looked like a human face inside a bush next to the garage door. I felt a cold sweat, but we decided to go inside and just try to relax. Once we were inside again and getting ready for bed, we saw bugs over and over again, almost like the cottage was infested with spiders and earwigs. At that point, my fiancé and I decided we had enough of that town, and we booked a hotel room for that night. It was around 11 p.m.-ish when we left, maybe a little earlier. The hotel was about 40 minutes away. The drive was all right at first until it took us to a dirt road with nothing at all around us. At this point, my mom had called us worried about us being out late in a foreign state. We stayed on the phone to calm our nerves. As we drove, a series of events played out. First, a black cat ran right across the road in front of our car. I was more freaked out about this because of that old saying on top of everything else that had happened that night. As we drove, there were no streetlights or signs, and my phone kept losing service, so we relied on Apple Maps to get us there. A little ways in, I saw a huge cow sitting on the side of the road just laying there. There wasn't a single other cow around him, or any other animal for that matter. And looking back on it now, I didn't see its eyes. The car lights didn't reflect his eyes, and he was really close. Almost seconds after, on the other side of the same road, I saw a giant white figure that almost resembled a horse, but the legs were too skinny, and it had no head, and it moved almost like it glided. Come to find out, my fiancé saw what looked like a man walking to our car as soon as we got on the dirt road, and didn't say anything because she was scared. I didn't say anything about the figure I saw either because I know speaking it out is a bad idea, especially at night, and I didn't want to scare my fiancé. Once we got to the hotel, the gut sinking was gone and we felt better. But I had a horrific nightmare about my mom dying and crawling around the ceiling like something out The Grudge. And when I woke up, my fiancé blamed the road for my dream. I think she was mostly joking, but I'm starting to think she was right. Even as I'm trying to write this out, I'm having problems with my keyboard lagging, or Reddit closing me out of it. I switched to my notes app to write this, but it makes it so much more eerie. This just happened a few days ago, so it's still fresh in my mind, but I wanted to share this because I wanted to know if anyone knows WTF happened that night, or if that town has something wrong with it, literally anything. 2 moons ago, I was making my tri-weekly McDonald's trip. My local McDonald's is like a second home to me. I know all the employees by name and love them dearly. I've even spilt a Big Mac with the manager before. I pulled into the almost empty parking lot and delicately maneuvered my automobile into my personal parking space. I shot a glance at my clock, which read 2:09. 2:09? I blurted out, that can't be right. I then remembered that the clock in my car was wrong. Depressed, I stuck my hand into my warm polyester pocket. My hand searched the abyss known as my pocket diligently. My heart was pounding at this point. I then felt it, the smooth silicone that is my phone case. I gripped it and quickly ripped it from my pocket. I turned it on and groaned in pain. It hurt my eyes to look within the glass rectangle. It was the brightest thing my mole-like eyes had ever seen. I don't know how to change the brightness, so I rarely ever use my phone in order to preserve my eyes. After a few minutes of attempting to decipher the time that was lost within this piercing light, I was able to learn that the time was 6:41, I put my phone back inside my pocket and exited my car. The sun was starting to set. The sky was a rich collage of oranges and reds. I wanted to stop and gaze upon this natural beauty before me, but I did not want to be without my McDonald's meal longer than I had to. I walked up to the door and pushed it open. I stepped inside and took a deep breath. The smell of juicy burgers and freshly baked apple pies flooded my nostrils, and my mind began to enter a trance. The feeling of spit dripping down my body was enough to break the spell I was under. Finally, home, I said quietly. I started my journey into this heaven-like place. Half the lights were off, and there was only one other customer there. It was an ancient-looking man dressed from head to toe in black watch plaid. The man looked hypnotized, his dreamy eyes transfixed on his tray. Strangely, the only thing in his tray was a single French fry. It was no ordinary French fry, I quickly deduced. It was abnormally large as 6 cat femurs bundled together. The French fry was also bright yellow. I slowly shifted my gaze away from this sad-looking man and headed towards the counter to place my order. I had never seen the man who was at the register tonight before. He was scruffy-looking. He looked to be in his middle years, but truthfully, he could have been 20 or 70, and I would not have been able to tell by looking at him. I hope you understand. He was wearing a piece of headwear known as a beanie with a bright yellow M on it. A new hire, I thought to myself. I need to make a good impression. I decided to tickle his funny bone by ejaculating the funniest voice I could come up with upon his ears. I continued my way towards the counter. Drip, drip, drip. A leak from the ceiling caught my attention as I grew ever nearer to the man. I stopped my walking because I had reached the counter. I prepared to make my order. Ahem. I cleared my throat in order to make my presence known to the man who had been turned away from the counter at this point. As soon as I made a sound, the man spun around at a lightning speed and glared at me. His filmy orbs pierced my soul, instilling an eerie sense of dread deep within my stomach. I stood silently for 10 seconds before daring to speak again. I began to order. I opened my mouth and the voice that rang from me was oh so funny, so funny. It took all my power just to stop myself from chortling at myself. I began a 10-piece chicken nugget meal with a Fanta, 3 cheeseburgers, and an apple pie and a large chocolate milkshake. The man looked unamused as he took my order. Why, I thought, why isn't he laughing? That always works. I furrowed my brow. This man is the opposite of normal. I began to take out my wallet to pay, but before I was able to reveal the leathery square to the man, he began to speak. Would you like to our new special item? The banana fry. A sinister grin began to form on his oblong face. A banana what now? I questioned. Still doing the voice, I committed myself to hoping still he would find it humorous. The banana fry, he continued. It's made from real bananas. It's really yummy. I promise you've never had anything like it before. The man's grin had morphed into a full tooth smile at this point, his piercing black eyes staring at me. Unblinking. I'll try it, I suppose I muttered. Moments after these words left my mouth, the man let out a howling cackle that echoed throughout the whole restaurant. Even the plaid-coated man's meditative state was disrupted by this horrible sound. The man stopped laughing as suddenly as he had started and told me my total. I quickly paid the fee and walked away. I stood anxiously waiting for my feast. It felt like time had slowed down as I stood there as a stone sculpture stands in a rich man's garden. After this grueling wait, my order number was called. I quickly grabbed my bags and swiftly departed from this once soothing place. I climbed into my car and tried to calm myself down. I was quite perplexed by what had just happened and decided I needed to do something to ease my soul. I shut my eyes and began to do a breathing exercise that my Uncle Ronnie had taught me. Do this when you get scared, pussy. His words rang clear within my mind. In and out, in and out, in and out. I could feel the fear exiting my body. It felt wonderful. All my worries had vanished. I was finally at peace. The odor from my McDonald's had become prevalent in my car. It could feel making its way through my nose holes, tickle each and every nose hair that I called my own. A smile began to form on my face. I let out a small chuckle, and to myself I said, "This is what true happiness feels like. I'm sure of it." Suddenly, a loud knocking occurred to my left. I yelped. My heart started to pound rapidly. My peaceful moment had been ended by what I could only assume was a creature with male intent. I quickly opened my eyes and gazed towards the source of the sound. I felt as if my shade had left my body when I looked over and saw those inky black holes staring at me. Unblinking, staring at me. The McDonald's employee made a gesture with his hands. Confused by this, I rolled down my window and questioned the fiend. "What's with the gang signs, Honcho?" "What?" The man retorted. "I was trying to get you to roll down your window." My response was simple, "I see." 7 seconds of silence passed before the man spoke again. "You dropped this when you left." He slowly handed me his enclosed fist. I carefully unfolded his pale, bony fingers, similar to how a child unwraps their Christmas package. Within his hand, a single quarter lay. I grabbed it and thanked the man, who simply winked in response. He ran back inside, and I thought it best to leave swiftly before anything else happened. I drove faster than I normally do as I headed, my heart still beating from the previous interaction. I reached my home in a decent amount of time and excited my car with my meal. I opened the door of my house, and my nose instantly became infected with the stench of my mother's cooking. I loudly exclaimed, "I'm home," and darted to my room before my family members could react. I scanned my room to make sure nothing had been touched or, God forbid, moved. I then Saturday in my vintage yellow McDonald's chair I had found on Facebook Marketplace a few years ago. I only sit in this chair when I have McDonald's. I began the ceremony. First, I ate all of my French fries. Then I started to eat my chicken nuggets. I ate 5 before stopping. I then devoured 2 of the cheeseburgers. I took a short bathroom break and drank my milkshake and ate my apple pie. I flushed the toilet and returned to my room. I ate the last cheeseburger and 3 more nuggets, chugged my Fanta, and finally ingested the last 2 nuggets. "What a wonderful meal," I exclaimed. This is truly the highlight of my day. As I Saturday there thinking about my meal, I began to smell it. The banana fry. The thought of it had removed itself from my mind, but its now potent odor had reminded me of this odd food. I peered inside the bag and looked at it. Its yellow hue had a soothing effect on my mind. I reached inside the bag and firmly grasped it. I Saturday down on my throne and slowly licked my lips before inserting the yellow object into my mouth. I took a bite and let it sit on my tongue for a minute before swallowing. It was the most delicious thing I had ever had in all my years alive. I devoured the rest of it in no time at all. I leaned back in my chair and laughed to myself. I then maneuvered to my bed and fell asleep. I woke up to the sensation of my mother shaking me vigorously. "It's TV time," she said. "Every day my family, which consists of me, my mother, my uncle, and his male lover, all gather together to watch a bit of television together. We enjoy this activity immensely as it helps us feel connected as a family." My mother and I entered the TV room where my uncle and his lover were already Saturday waiting for us. We all Saturday together on the sofa and held hands. My uncle operated the TV and put on a show called The Boys, one of the funniest shows ever made. We all watched it happily for 25 minutes before I suddenly let out a loud yelp. I fell to the floor and gripped my stomach. The agony I felt in that moment is indescribable. It felt as if I was being bitten by 1,000 fire ants while simultaneously having a rusty knife plunged into my lungs. My family had come down from the sofa and surrounded me, trying to make sense of my sudden change of mood. I screamed and screamed. "What is happening?" my uncle yelled into my ear. My mother ran from the room and returned with a wet rag and placed it on my forehead. After 20 or so minutes, the pain began to subside, and I stopped screaming. My family embraced me and helped me to my feet. They then said to me something horrible. "Your skin," they said in unison. "It's yellow." I had no words. I began to think that this was merely all a dream, and swiftly kicked my uncle's lover in the balls. The man fell to floor and screamed loudly while gripping his family jewels. My uncle's jaw dropped, and he kicked me in the balls as retaliation. I howled loudly, and came to the conclusion that I was in fact not dreaming. Suddenly, without warning, a horn-like deformity erupted from my scalp. I screamed in pain. The pain, I assure you, if you felt it, you would end your own life. My mother then said, "You look like a banana." "What?" I shrieked and jolted to the bathroom to look in the mirror. My reflection was horrifying. My skin was banana yellow. On my head was a banana stem. I felt my skin. Its texture was reminiscent of a banana. I wept. I wept until I could weep no more. And when I could weep no more, I simply sat there in silence. My family stood at the bathroom door and watched. There was nothing they could do but watch. They knew, as did I, that I would soon fully transform. When it is clear that I more banana than man, eat me, dear mother. Please, I said solemnly. She nodded and I went to my room, climbed into my bed and entered my final slumber. Epilogue. Uncle Ronnie here. I will now recount the events of the morrow after my nephew's transformation. When we woke up the next morning, he had become a banana. A banana the size of a 5'6" man. We took his body to the kitchen and laid it on the table. We cried together for hours and paid our respects. We then peeled off the exterior of the banana boy and ate him. It took us hours. My sister vomited multiple times. It was the hardest thing any of us had ever had to do, and we hated every moment of it. But we had to do it. I leave you now with a warning. Never eat the banana fry from McDonald's.